Hey photo world, welcome back to another episode here on takeandtalkpics.com. This is another episode from the former podcast. Please subscribe, hit that notification bell, and join the email list. Let's get to that 1,000 subscriber marker so that way I can add a new video every single week. Enjoy. Hey photo world, Rob Kruger here, and today is the Monday message number 6. So today I wanted to go over 2 rules and 1 tip. The tip is with Lightroom, and the 2 rules are made to be broken. Now let me start with this. There are rules that are made to be broken, as they often are, but not laws. Laws are not made to be broken. Rules are made to be broken. So I wanted to be clear on that, so I'm not advocating anything horrible out there in the world. But let's get started on this. So one rule, the rule of thirds. It's the most common rule that we all hear as photographers, especially starting out. Everybody tells you about the rule of thirds, the rule of thirds. Lining everything up on these horizons and these grids and these vertical lines that are going to do everything strong for you. And guess what? It works. There are photographers out there that make their entire portfolio based on the rule of thirds. If nothing else, they want to make sure it falls well within this rule. So this rule is a nice hashtag-shaped grid, all right? And you have these 4 intersecting points here. It just looks like you're about to play some tic-tac-toe, but what you're going to do is frame perfectly. Now, I've found with my own work, I seem to gravitate towards a certain horizon and a certain intersection. So for whatever reason, I keep meeting my images right there. My subject matter falls well within those spaces. And what I have to do to make things different is, change my orientation of the camera, try a vertical rather than a landscape orientation, and then I can maneuver differently because I'm not seeing it as commonly as I often would. So, for myself, I find my intersection being that lower right. For whatever reason, that's like the hot spot for my rule of thirds, and I'm kind of getting sick of it, so I got to try something different. And I'm out here in Colorado, and I'm probably going to be doing something a little different, testing out my mirrorless system while I'm out here as well. And I think it's a really good rule, because if we have that horizon line for, where the sky meets the water or whatever, running through the middle, look at it. Just go look and Google it up, and find a few image samples. They're annoying. However, every once in a while, we'll see an image where all the rules are broken on this rule of thirds. They're not falling on an intersection. The lines are way off. And for whatever reason, it works. And those are the images you need to study. Now, I don't like to talk about pictures here on a podcast so much because it's hard to describe things to you. It's better if you have a visual sense. So what I'd rather do is give you a little homework. Go out and investigate images and start seeing the rule of thirds where it falls in place. And more importantly, find those images where it doesn't. But tell yourself if it's successful or not. And if you feel it is, study why. What is making that image? Is it really the composition? Or is it the lighting? Is it the subject matter? It could be a great many things. But find what is making the difference in your mind of why breaking that rule is working for you. Now, for the second rule I had in mind today, it's not really a specific rule. It's kind of a little rule of thumb that I've learned over the years, and a photographer, an instructor of mine in my college days told me about this one, and I've never heard any other photographer ever mention this. And I don't know why, because it's a really, really helpful tip. It's a really helpful tool, and I've committed it to being a rule, but of course, I break it all the time. And this rule is that your millimeters on your camera, wherever you're shooting at, the millimeters you're using, your shutter speed denominator should exceed that numerically. What? So I'm not going to throw out a whole lot of math at you or any terms there, but the denominator, we're shooting fractions of a second here. So 1/125th of a second, you need that at least for a 100 millimeter lens. You have a 100 millimeter lens, you need to exceed that with your shutter speed. So 125th of a second will exceed that numerically for our purpose. And that is used for handheld photography. So if you're wondering, when do I need a tripod? When can I hand hold? Look at the millimeters you're using, look at the shutter speed you are choosing, and decide whether or not it's going to be stable. Now, when we start putting things like flash into the mix, I do things all the time where I'll shoot an 1/8 of a second handheld for a wedding reception, but I have flash that's going to freeze my subject matter in place, and the ambient light is going to kind of, seep in and, fill the frame a little bit with that 1/8 of a second. So, I mean, there are plenty of times where you can break your rule and let it go and do things handheld when a lot of people tell you an 1/8 of a second's way too slow. But some cool things can come out of it. But I tell my students this at College of DuPage, if they don't know this one, it's such a great helpful tool when you're out there and wondering, can I hand hold this? If you got a 70 to 200 lens on, if you're zoomed out at 70, then you can shoot at 100th of a second, an 80th of a second. If you want to talk some third stops, that's fine. You can shoot as long as it's a little bit beyond the millimeters of your lens. So this lens will go to 200. It doesn't mean you have to shoot in excess of 200 or more, but it depends on the millimeters you are currently at. So regardless of the size of the lens and what it can do, the millimeters you're at, that frame that you have, that's where you start deciding the shutter speed denominator of what you can use for handheld. So take that with you with prime lenses, and especially on zoom lenses where it can get a little confusing as it changes quickly. But it's a helpful tip, a helpful trick, and a nice little rule, and feel free to break it. Get some cool stuff out there. So the one little tip I wanted to give you, the trick here, was Lightroom. I mean, if you're not using Lightroom, that's okay, but I would definitely go over there and just get a free trial download and try it out. Lightroom is a really great edit software, processing software. I do it for my batch edits where I'm doing many images all at once, similar lighting situations, white balance correction situations where I just need to change one thing, sync it to the rest of them, and move on. It gets me through editing a wedding in a much faster time than going one at a time through Photoshop CC or Elements, whatever you might have. But specifically, there's a Details tab. And the Details is referring to the sharpening and the noise reduction. And Photoshop offers a noise reduction. They offer a sharpening. They offer a ton of stuff that Lightroom already has. But the way the algorithms are built, the way the software manipulates the imagery, it's very different. And I feel that for the sharpening, Photoshop has the leg up. But for the noise reduction in the Details tab on Lightroom, that's where you're going to win out. And I always apply a noise reduction. This is what gives the creaminess to skin when I'm photographing people. And if I have any pictures of cars, which I like to do, a lot of different auto shows. And when I'm doing that stuff, I will turn the noise reduction up, even if I shot it at ISO 100 or even lower. And, it's not always about the clarity in the noise, but what it can do is kind of cream up the gradation between light and shadow. So it's helpful in that way, and the color noise reduction specifically is amazing for the lower light imagery that you have with the high ISO, and especially in those dark areas or the out of focus areas. So the way I set it, and they're fighting each other. Noise reduction is kind of softening things. Sharpening is trying to make things stand out. So they do fight one another. But the way I have it set, and I don't do my sharpening in Photoshop. I do it in Lightroom. It's easier. It's all applied right there, all the settings I need, and I throw it through. Specific images, I'll take them into Photoshop and do a little bit more with them or sharpen them specifically there in a different way. But the sharpening I have set up in Lightroom, I set the amount to 35. Now, standard, it'll do 25 with a radius of 1 and the detail at 25 with no masking. So I leave everything the same except for the amount in sharpening. I bump it up to 35. It gives a tiny bit more pop, and what this does is it frames up a little edge on groups of pixels, that radius of 1, so it's by every pixel that it is going to do a little edging on it, and that's what makes it sharpen. And back in the film days, they used to create another negative, and what you would do is offset it just a little bit, one negative on top of the other, and create this edge, which would appear as a sharpening when you go to print. Most people don't know that, but it does the exact same thing in digital, as it creates this edge on two sides, just moving a little offset in certain areas. It's a little bit more detailed in how it works that for a digital software like Lightroom rather than film days, but the concept is still the same, and it does give the appearance of better sharpening. Now that sharpening is going to degrade the noise just a little bit further and make it even harder to work with, so I've found a good balance that works for most of my images, and I put the noise reduction, I leave everything the same except for the luminance. I bump that to 25. The detail stays at 50, the contrast is at 0. And then the color, I bumped that up to 35. And the detail also stays at 50 for that one. So I'm only moving 3 sliders in this tab, of the details tab. On the sharpening side, I move the slider on the amount to 35. For the noise reduction, I'll bring luminance to 25 and color to 35. So go ahead and plug that in, make a little preset for your sharpening and noise reduction in Lightroom so you can do a quick apply, see how it works for you, see if those are the right settings you want to use, and have at it. Use it on your day-to-day shoots, use it in everything that you're doing. I found it really works for me. It's dialed in. I don't have to go too much further in any direction with either one of those options of sharpening or noise reduction, but they do a great job working together. So that's it. That's our Monday message. Go out and investigate the rule of thirds. Try it a little bit more, break it a little bit more. I don't know. Do whatever you want. Play with that shutter speed rule where we have to have the denominator of the shutter speed exceeding our millimeters for handheld photography. See how it works for you in actually trying it that way, and then see the places where you can break that rule and making it still work in your favor. And then that last little tip, just the details tab here in Lightroom, the sharpening and noise reduction. And, I hope you're getting some great stuff out of this podcast here. I love doing the Take and Talk Pics show and meeting so many awesome photographers and bringing you their stories. But until next time, I'm Rob Kruger. This is Take and Talk Pics. We just did our 6th week of the Monday message. I'm going to see you guys next time, and happy shooting. Do you ever need a source on where you can find a way to get your travels in order? BestTravelForLess.com is the place to go. I use them for all my travel booking needs, for whether it be a destination wedding or just to get away. You can find their information directly on the affiliates page over at takeandtalkpics.com or reach out right away through BestTravelForLess.com. Photo World, takeandtalkpics.com. Thank you again for joining us today, and we really appreciate you stopping by. Make sure you share this with your friends and photo family out there. We'll see you next time. This is Rob Kruger. Happy shooting.